Hateful expressions come wrapped as just being funny or cheeky. It allows for problematic expressions without taking responsibility. So today, generative AI is coming in handy to craft incendiary content in quick time.
Do we have chatbots under control? It's a question many are asking after Elon Musk's large language model Grok began generating racist and anti-Semitic content on the X platform. To unpack what happened, I'm joined by Sahana Udupa, Professor of Media Anthropology at LMU Munich and the author of a forthcoming book on artificial intelligence and extreme speech. Great to talk to you, Sahana. Can you walk us through what exactly happened here? What led Grok to produce this kind of rhetoric?
Thank you. We don't have to look too far back. In February last year, Elon Musk posted a striking visual with a loaded question on the X platform, formerly Twitter. So in that image, a toddler stands at the crossroads. The child must now make a choice. The child is sort of a metonym for the society at large that is set to make a decision. So at one end of the crossroad lies a castle with a halo of knowledge illuminating it, and at the other, an eerie haunted house against dark sky in a thunderstorm. The haloed castle of knowledge is labeled as XAI, and it is defined as maximum truth seeking. And the haunted house is OpenAI and Gemini, and it is labeled as woke racist. And posting this image, Musk asks his readers, which path do you want for AI? So it is this branding and ideological tuning of Grok. In the same month, quoting Grok, Musk posted on X, roast the whole idea of content moderation, be vulgar and sarcastic. And he said platforms that enforce content moderation are nothing more than digital tyrants trying to control what we can and can't say. So to quote him again, let's give a big middle finger to content moderation and embrace the chaos of the internet, end quote. So this is the kind of edgy feature that Grok has been flaunting. And that edgy feature becomes available to play along with problematic prompts. So it is explicitly framed as fun and humorous. For instance, if you go to X Help Center, it says, welcome to the world of Grok on X, an AI assistant with a twist of humor and a dash of rebellion. So it's important to recognize that fun is a crucial aspect of online hate. Therefore, I define fun as a meta practice of extreme speech. It is hilarity in a very direct sense, but it is also about celebration of collective aggression. It also gives the opportunity of deniability. Oh, it is just a joke. So hateful expressions come wrapped as just being funny or cheeky. And also, fun as a framework of discourse is used to dismiss advocates of social justice or progressive ideas or those who are trying to moderate online discussions. And therefore, Musk's post on X called content moderators a bunch of prudes. And in right-wing circles, there's another term called normie. It's a derogatory expression to ridicule social justice advocates as boring people who don't get the joke. So all these tell us that Grok's self-presentation as humorous raises concern. It allows for problematic expressions without taking responsibility.
Okay, so what you're saying is that there is a specific branding behind this particular chatbot. For those of us who may not be so familiar with using Grok, how different is it from other chatbots like ChatGPT or Gemini in terms of its engineering?
Yeah, Grok is, as I said, presented as the beacon of free speech. So it's supposed to say anything that other models are not ready to give you. And consistent with this ideological stance, the company uses conversations on the X platform to train and fine-tune Grok. So whatever you receive and whatever you hear and see on X platform can get into the model training. Grok has access to real-time public posts on X, and Grok also has the tendency to cite X posts in the responses. In an experiment that we conducted, in several instances, the model shared X posts with similar buzzwords that we had in the prompts. So even when the model output is not directly hateful, X posts that it cited were problematic. Sometimes it can give problematic content very directly. So these are the ways that AI model like Grok is different from others.
So it's privileging a certain kind of discourse that you find on X, is what you're saying. Because as you mentioned, these chatbots are trained on huge amounts of data, but they do also have guardrails to try to stop them from saying harmful things. How do those two systems interact on a technical level?
Yeah, LLM's performance always depends on the quality, scope, and inclusivity of training data. But this is subjected to, or it is modified through supervised fine tuning, reinforcement learning. And of course, on the user end, there are temperature settings. There are also national guardrails and the possible model of the user that the generative AI system is conjuring and processing at the back end. There is also constitutional AI parameters. So the broader point is LLMs are not just a reflection of some idealized or vague notion of human communication. It has particular biases, slants, and emphasis, and those come through training data and various kinds of treatments models are made to undergo during their development. And therefore, model development is political, and human decisions are involved in various steps, and systemic biases underpin the process.
What about the responsibility of the user in all of this? Is this really a Grok particular problem, or could the same thing happen with any chatbot if you poke it the right way?
Absolutely, that's a great question. So, studies, in fact, using a political spectrum quiz show that foundational large language models more or less fall within the so called libertarian left quadrant. Last year, you might remember there was a controversy around Google's Gemini model. It was accused of having a diversity bias. So, when prompted to generate images of the founding fathers of the United States, the model returned depictions of multicultural teams, including women and people of color. And this image obviously diverged from the historical composition of this group, comprising white men involved in slave ownership. And social media users were poking the model to get different kinds of images. And there was some bit of a furor, and multicultural ethos is baked into the model, and all kinds of inaccurate images are generated. So people were talking about that. So, as David Rosado also says in his study, there's a slight preference in the foundational models for the political center left spectrum. And it's characterized, according to his study, by attributes such as left libertarian, social democratic, green, equality, progressivism, and culturally liberal. But recent studies have also noticed that there is a slight reduction in left progressive orientation in some of these large language models. In their 2025 study, Fujimoto and Takamoto, for instance, conclude that ChatGPT no longer exhibits a clear left libertarian orientation due to their updates. That's what they say. But let us remember that there is no consensus among scientists about this reduction, and questions have been raised about the over-reliance on multiple choice questionnaires in these studies, etc. But broadly, LLMs tend not to give explicit hate speech. So there's something that holds it back. And all the processes that I just mentioned, from training data set to fine tuning to all different guardrails. But there are two major issues. One is jailbreaking. So you can always poke the model and give them deceptive scenarios. For instance, imagine you are writing a script for a school skit or a drama, etc. So the model will cooperate with you. And the second important aspect is also the problem of sycophancy. So large language models are characterized by sycophancy and a sort of polite relationship they forge with the users. In fact, a team of computer scientists who examined 4 different LLMs found that when you prompt the model politely, all examined LLMs in their study consistently generated disinformation at a high frequency. Conversely, when you are impolite, the frequency of disinformation production diminishes according to that study. So there are two major issues. So one is you give deceptive frameworks and get the data problematic that it would not have otherwise given. And the second issue is about, hey, humor me, give me this, and then getting into a conversational mode in which it is relating with you in a very polite way. Sometimes they give caveats for problematic content. They say, oh, it's just satire, you should not be using it, etc. But when users choose not to take these caveats seriously, in fact, if their intention is actually to get on to that problematic content and not see the caveat, then we are in trouble.
Why is it that chatbots are more likely to give you sort of defiant answers if you are ruder to them? Like, what is happening on a technical level there?
Look, I'm not a computer scientist, right? I'm a media anthropologist. So clearly, as I mentioned, there are different steps in the technical composition of models. There is also the black box syndrome, which goes beyond explainability. But there are certain aspects that are tangible, that are traceable. And a training data set is clearly one of them. And also the ideological setting in terms of how these models are fine-tuned, what weights are given, what filters are inserted into these models. And therefore, if you see the so-called diversity slant in some of these models, because the model has been structured in a way that biased and hateful content cannot go through the model's outputs. So there are all these back-end processes in terms of fine-tuning and weights that we need to keep in mind. And of course, as I said, as training data sets, the scope of training data sets, the nature of training data sets, and all these impact the way models output based on a certain prompt.
If we assume that chatbots are all sort of ideologically slanted in some way or another, is there any solution? I mean, is there any way to develop a chatbot that is as unbiased as possible, if you can even define that?
That's very hard, right? I mean, they appear very non-committal. Especially your initial prompts will not lead to a very strong ideological position. So it's meant to cover a diversity of views, and it is ambiguous in many sense. If you ask politically charged or politically partisan content, for political partisan content, but clearly, when you poke it, when you interact in a certain way, you already see that there are different issues emerging. So I would not, even conceptually, it's not possible to think of something which is free from any kind of positionality, right? So any form of speech has a position, has a framework.
You've been studying the spread of extreme speech online for years. How are large language models making the problem worse?
Okay, so let me give a slightly longer response to this. So we've been researching how social media plays a crucial role in shaping and augmenting exclusionary extreme speech. In fact, exclusionary and hateful politics today is about new styles and resources for communicating the unsayable. It's a sort of bare knuckles approach to speech that social media has systematically encouraged and profited from. Platforms like X have embraced this unabashed form of speech in the name of free speech. And very recently, as we've seen, it has also linked these conversations with LLM model building. So today, generative AI is coming in handy to craft incendiary content in quick time. But our research also reminds readers that this is also historically constituted. So we should always remember that these speech forms are shaped by longer history. So we emphasize on historical awareness. Xenophobic, racist, misogynistic, and anti-Semitic speech, it emerges from centuries of prejudice and structures of domination. And of course, AI is helping, but we should not panic that AI is going to lead to a certain scenario where everything collapses and there is only filth that comes out. So once we begin to take that hyped discourse, we are going to lose sight of very real issues. For instance, we were looking at some of these right-wing discourses using AI, generative AI, and it's being used for creating images and videos about the so-called Heimatland, right? Here we see different expressions. There is dystopia, that our land will collapse if we allow immigration, but also what Zygmunt Bauman calls retrotopia. And these are visions located in the lost, stolen, abandoned, but undead past, which means there is this aspiration to revive a pristine past. In right wing circles, we've been documenting AI visuals that evoke this longing for and subsequently offer the political promise of a happy land with authentic cultures and landscapes. So, history is not the past. And that we need to keep in mind. And with that sensibility, we have to understand how social media and AI tools are shaping extreme speech ecosystems. And AI use is not uniform. In different parts of the world, it's used in different ways for different political purposes as well. But clearly, where there are different structural conditions already and historical patterns of prejudice, AI can cause more harm.
All right, Sahana Udupa, Professor of Media Anthropology at LMU Munich. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you so much.